Hello, today is day 62, and we're reading from Numbers chapter 18 through 20, and lots of things happen here. A lot of sad things happen in today's reading. Yesterday, God validated Aaron's role, and today he addresses Aaron directly, and the priesthood, and the qualifications, and the rituals that need to be associated. How then they are to care for the tabernacle. And so he gives a distinction here. Aaron and his sons are to guard the inside, the tabernacle, the holy things, and the Levites are to be responsible for the outside. The people are commanded to tithe, and so they're taking of the tenth of what they make, and they're giving it then. God is using that to support the priesthood, the Levites, and the ministry and the tabernacle itself. But what's neat here is that the Levites are required to tithe off the tithe. And so sometimes ministry workers and leaders feel as though they don't need the tithe, but here it makes it clear a pattern that those of us who are full-time in the ministry are expected and required to tithe as well. This is their inheritance, the Bible says, for the Levites. They have no land that's been distributed to them as the other tribes, and so they are going to learn how to have total faith and confidence and trust, dependence upon God alone. The book of Numbers has given us a rapid overview. It's remarkable. The book of Deuteronomy will begin to fill in a lot of the blanks here, because think of it, just chapters ago, we were into the first year of their wilderness living, and now we're reading here that 30 years have passed in chapters 19 and 20. So now 2 million people approximately have died. Thus is why we're being introduced to the death purification laws. Now think of what it must have been like. All of those carcasses dying there in the wilderness, in the desert, and why this would be quite an ordeal. Now we're also told here that Miriam dies, the older sister, the one who cared for infant Moses, and is only given one sentence that she has now died, the prophetess of God. A new generation now is risen up, and like their parents, they're grumbling. They've inherited grumbling and negativity, and they're saying the same phrases that their parents. And where do you think our kids learn some of their lingo? It says, if only we had died as others. In other words, they're referring not only those who hundreds of thousands who died natural deaths. I think they're talking about those who died by fire and the plague and the ground that opened up on Korah. They're looking back and saying, we'd be better off dead out of this misery. And then they ask the question, why have you brought us out of Egypt? And so now the kids are whining and joining in to the chorus of their parents. They said, it's not a place like you've told us, Moses, of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. And so once again, they're without water and they're thirsty. Moses and Aaron, in the midst of this grumbling, says they fell on their faces before God. And here comes the glory. The Lord shows up and the glory comes, and God gives precise instructions and provision for the children of Israel. It says, take the rod that you have of Aaron and gather the children, and you're going to speak to the rock, Moses, before their eyes. And he says this, quote, thus you shall bring water for them from the rock. Now, Moses, though, here is interesting. Of all the time that he spent in these 40 years, he disobeys God out of anger, out of sheer exhaustion. And you know, I don't think it's more than he just got out of the wrong side of the bed. I think this is an accumulation of frustration of dealing with these belly aching, whining, griping people. And what would we say is his crime? Why was God angry with him? Well, I think there are three things God tells us here. First, because you did not believe me, God says. Secondly, because you failed to hallow my name. And thirdly, you rebelled. And he's 120 years old. Anger gets the best of him. He calls them rebels and becomes a rebel himself. His punishment, you cannot enter into the promised land. How sad that he journeys this long, is faithful to God. And you say, what was the big deal about him striking the rock twice? Remember that this rock was struck once before. This is a pattern and the type, and why it's so important. The rock represents Jesus, and he was struck once, crucified once, and he doesn't have to die again. He doesn't have to be struck again. He died once for all. And so this really affects the typology that God was establishing. Obeying God to the letter is a most important thing. Even slight disobedience incurs serious ramification. Aaron is told in advance he's going to die, and the transfer of his office to Eleazar, his son, and yet he will not enter into the promised land. All of this a warning to us how important it is for us to have the word, obey the word, and to fully give our lives to Jesus in everything he commands us to do.